The long-term thing that's going on is that the Earth is cooling. It has been cooling because of what's called the Milankovitch cycles. They're getting less and less, just by gradual amounts, of sunlight above 65 degrees north. And you take a look at the glaciers that we have. Do you know that we don't have any glaciers up here in the northern hemisphere that are older than about 8,000 years? All those glaciers are not something left over from the past ice age. They're new. They have been forming as the Earth has been cooling down. The Milankovitch cycles tell us that eventually the Earth is going to go into this deep freeze again, which has spent 90% of the time in deep freeze over the last several 100,000 years. It spent 90% of its time there in these deep freezes. And we're headed for one. And if CO2 can help stave us off from that a little bit, that would be nice.
All the evidence we have shows that warming has occurred in the past, and so have ice ages. Ice ages usually lasted 100,000 years. The warmings between ice ages, between glaciations, lasted about 10,000 years. We're now in an interglacial between ice ages, and I fully expect to see another ice age, maybe not in my lifetime, but in many people's lifetime, maybe even in this century. We might be in the beginning of the next ice age right now. Ice age is serious because it affects agriculture, and another ice age now would cause mass starvations. This is the first time the human population is as large as it has been, ever has been, with billions of people in the world. In the previous ice ages, there were mostly maybe 1 million people. So they could feed themselves, or they could hunt animals and survive. That would be impossible now. We need to be prepared for some kind of problems if the climate should cool. And it behooves us to do something to be prepared. I've actually worked on that, and I'm a strong believer that we should prepare ourselves for a cooling of the climate. That is the real danger. Warming doesn't hurt anybody. All we do is dress lightly, and we have air conditioning, which means we can survive nicely. But cooling is serious. We can probably survive cooling itself because we have enough energy to heat ourselves. But the food problem is the serious one. Agriculture will not survive another ice age.
There are good reasons to believe that we're in for a cooling period. As much as the IPCC likes to blame everything on carbon dioxide, they do not consider the sun. Now, there is a considerable body of evidence that goes as follows. When the sun is active and there's a lot of sunspots, then That energy drives the cosmic rays away. And when the sun is quiet, the cosmic rays come through. When they come through and strike the surface of the Earth, most of the Earth is water. So we've got 71% of the Earth is water. When those cosmic rays come in, there's quite a bit of evidence, and there's a fellow named Svensmark, a Dane, and he proposed this theory. The idea is that when the sun's energy is weak and the cosmic rays come in, then those cosmic rays seed the clouds that are the stratocumulus clouds.
We actually found experimental evidence that the sun and the galaxy is determining climate here on Earth.
The idea is that when the sun's energy is weak and we create more of these low-level stratocumulus clouds, then when the sun's radiation comes in, it reflects that radiation away and the Earth cools. And Svensmark is the guy who has put this together in a very good and very well organized, and certainly contrary to this, carbon dioxide is the death of everything notion.
When you increase the amount of cloud cover on the planet, the amount of floating ice and the snow covering Asia, when sunlight hits that, it bounces off and is reflected at wavelengths that CO2 cannot intercept. Shortwave radiation. The planet must get colder. The donut around Antarctica last year was a record 20 million square kilometers, and it's floating, but it replaces 80% absorbing ocean and flips it to 70% reflecting ice and snow. It has to get colder. And what's worse, because that donut is getting bigger, the radius of clouds around Antarctica is also getting larger. And clouds do the same thing. It's called albedo, reflectivity, and it is at this point making the planet cooler. The atmosphere. And Southern Ocean, by the way, is plummeting in temperature. The rest of the oceans are still warming, but the rate at which they're warming is slowed down. So the planet is kind of cooling off.
Ice ages usually lasted 100,000 years. The warmings between ice ages, between glaciations, lasted about 10,000 years. We should prepare ourselves for a cooling of the climate. That is the real danger.
Long-term thing over several thousand years, and we don't know when it's going to happen exactly, but the Earth will cool down.